Well, hi again, everybody, and welcome to another episode of 100 Yards of Football. This is our Legends edition, and along with our co-host and founder, Vincent Turner, I'm Harper LeBel. Our producer today is Jeremiah Long. We thank him for all of the pictures and the photos that you're going to get to see here in just a minute. And today we're going to talk about one of the meanest, toughest, dirtiest players that you'll ever want to have on your team. He was an amazing two-way player, the last of the Mohicans when it comes to that, one Chuck Bednarik.
Chuck B, when they say you do this for a living or you're doing this for a hobby, and you read about all these great football players, if this gentleman can't get your juices flowing, I don't know who can. I remember being an eighth grader in 1973 at Sherwood Junior High going to the library, stack a roll of the sports section, and I pull out an NFL book, and there's Chuck B with that hit on Frank Gifford. Then I read about his life, his career. You talk about people in life that bag up what they do, people that's real, people that don't have no fear. Usually call them fearless. Chuck B was at the top of the list that played in the National Football League and in college and what he did outside that. There's three things I know about Chuck B that I want to say before we get started today. Nicknamed Charlie of Concrete. The definition of concrete is cement water. Then you think about warrior. The movie Warriors Come Out to Play. The definition of warrior. Brave and experienced soldier. And then you talk about insanity. The state of being seriously mental. By no means. This guy here, not only one of the dirtiest, meanest football players, but his life that he done before that. And I'm going to let Mr. Harper LeBel start us off today. Back to you, Harper.
Well, you've certainly done your research, Vincent. And if you have done your research as a fan of the show, we appreciate you taking advantage of that. You can go to mybookie.ag, take advantage of your sports or your casino or your racing background, and hopefully make it an advantageous one for you. mybookie.ag. You go online, you register your name, you sign up for an account. Once it's given to you, then you fund it, and next thing you know, you can place a bet anywhere in the world, whether it be Major League Baseball, you could talk about NHL or NBA playoffs, the upcoming draft, or when football season kicks in, you'll have everything that you need to get started. Put in promotional code MM50, and we would appreciate it if you did. That helps the show. But the MM50 will get you free chips and some background to getting started and some additional information. You'll love the site. It's so easy to pick on the odds for your favorite team, your favorite sporting event. If you liked Premier Soccer, or if you wanted to bet on horse or auto racing, it's all available for you. We appreciate you being a part of the mybookie.ag crowd, and MM50 is the promotional code that you would want to use. Now, speaking of promotion, my goodness, this guy was the first and really the greatest of the last two-way player that existed in the National Football League. Charles Philip Bednarik, born on May 1st, 1925. So right about the time that he was a teenager. He grew up in the Great Depression. His parents, Charles and Mary Bednarik, had 6 children. Chuck was the first. They were from Slovakian descent. They got out of Slovakia before the World War took place, and they moved to Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. Now, one thing about the father is that he never learned to either read or write or speak English well enough to earn the promotions that he was due. He couldn't become a foreman because there's a lot of paperwork involved, and he just couldn't do the language very well. So he was kind of stagnant in his career with Bethlehem Steel. He was there for a long time, very loyal to the company, but they grew up in Bethlehem. And when Chuck was in junior high school, Broggold Junior High, Paul Troxel was the football coach there. And he says to Mrs. Bednarik, I think your son is a pretty good athlete. I think he should come out for football. And she said no. She wanted nothing to do with it. She thought her little boy would get hurt, and she wanted no part of the game of football. But Charles Sr. got involved a little bit, and he looked at the wife and he said, you know what, it might be good for the boy to do something a little bit different. I think he should be allowed to play. And he did. And what a difference that made. He goes to high school, Vincent, and it was called Liberty High School, and played well enough there to get noticed, and obviously a chance to at least consider playing college. But World War II kicks in, and he ends up not even getting his degree, but he exchanges his degree for his service. He crosses the line. He joins the Army Air Corps. There are some folks that said he went into the Air Force. The Air Force didn't exist until 1947. So Vincent, he crosses the line and he signs up, and he becomes a waist gunner in a B-24. But early on, football, even though he loved playing, he didn't get to fulfill the requirements to get into college. The war obviously kicked in and changed everybody's world back in those days.
I want everyone out here, our listening audience, the 100 Yards Football, listen to what I have to say today on this particular topic. He went into it wasn't the Air Force, who was called at the time?
Army Air Corps, yep.
Army Air Corps. He was a bomber. Help me out, Hop. He was a bomber gunner, right?
He was a waist gunner on the side of a B-24 Liberator, yes.
At 19, 20 years old, he flew 30 combat missions in Germany in World War II, right? 30 combat missions. I want everybody to let that resonate there, folks. We even talk about him getting to the football, into the national, or playing college or the National Football League. This guy was a bomber gunner. And what's so amazing, he flew 30 missions and came back alive. But during one of those missions, the plane, I believe, was caught on fire off the runway. He had to kick the door out and had to jump 20 feet. 20 feet. We ain't talking about Chuck B as a football player right now. We're talking about a young man that's in war. That's why this is so special here today on 100 Yards of Football. That's why I choose these great players, man. Their lives are something else. Back to you, Mr. Harp.
Yeah, his military service in the Army Air Corps consisted of him being on a B-24 heavy long-distance bomber. He was in the 8th Air Force Division, 30 combat missions, as you mentioned, Vincent. So he won the Air Medal. 4 times he won the Oak Leaf Cluster, the European, African, Middle Eastern Campaign Medal, and he had 4 Battle Star medals that he received as well. His first mission was over Berlin, Germany on August 24th, 1944. Imagine that. And his last mission was in Zweisel. That's a little city in southeastern Germany, just east of, not just, but east of Munich. That was on April 20th, 1945. So the 30 missions that he was able to survive, from all of them, the war ends. He takes a break, doesn't want to play football right away, doesn't even want to go to college. And that might have been a meltdown that a lot of servicemen really needed in order to get their lives back together and to figure out what they were going to do when they got back stateside. So obviously a tremendous decision that needed to be made and what he wanted to do for the rest of his life. But as you mentioned, Vince, he was 17, maybe 18 years old when he first started. The war ends, and he says, well, maybe I got a chance to get my higher education. And he enrolls at Penn. He's a Quaker. He gets in, and he plays there at Penn. And Penn had a couple of pretty good teams, if you don't mind me saying so. 1945, this is still while Chuck was overseas. They were the number 8 team in the country. When Chuck joins the team in 1946, they were number 13. And in 1947, they were the number 7 team in the country. So obviously Chuck had a little bit to do with their success, but he was called a 60-minute man. He's one of those guys that he played center, and he was a linebacker on the other side of the ball. Hardly ever came off the field. In fact, there was one game where they measured the time that he was on the field. It was 58 minutes. There were times where he punted, so he was still on the team. Maybe not on kickoff or kickoff return, but gosh, every other play, he was out there giving everything he had. So he gets to Penn. He gets the education at Penn. He had to trade out his high school education, but he takes advantage of the system. And next thing you know, the Philadelphia Eagles, who actually played in the very same field that he was on. I'm sure they had a chance to witness him on numerous occasions. They ended up drafting him number 1 in the 1959 draft. So very interesting, 1949. I'm sorry, I'm off by a decade, but very interesting perspective is that he didn't have to change his locker very much and go a little bit further down the hallway between when he finished his college career and getting started with his Eagles.
I want to say something, step back a little bit. He's out of Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. And I can see why that we're talking about this guy in the sense of greatness. And I did my research last night, and I kind of see the neighborhood he comes out of in Bethlehem. Listen to these names. Michael Andretti, Indy car racer, son of Mario Andretti. Mike Hardenstein, hell of a football player in the mid-'70s for Penn State, played with the Bears and Vikings. Billy Packer, one of the greatest announcers of college basketball, ACC great, Wake Forest. And then I know why the water is so good. Matter of fact, I'm putting it on my do list to go through Bethlehem. Saquon Barkley is out of the same area. Now I see why this great man, Chuck B, is so great and what he done, not only in his life, is on the field. And you're looking at the skill set. He played both center and linebacker in the National Football League. 1949 to 1962, and the durability he had 140. He played 169 games out of 172 games. And the skill set, hard-nosed and dominant as a center. Versatile and powerful as any blocker that's played in the National Football League. Job breaking at the linebacker position. And the tackling off the charts. November the 20th, 1960, knockout blow, Frank Gifford. The mic has dropped. Back to you, Mr. Harper LeBel.
Yeah, we'll look at that in just a second. Let's take a look at, his college career. He was an All-American, second-team All-American in 1946, and then he was a consensus All-American, first-teamer, meaning everybody all agreed that he was going to be on that All-American team in 47 and 48. He actually finished third in the Heisman. Think about that for an offensive, for a center, for a linebacker. Are you kidding me? He ended up marrying his college sweetheart, Emma Martigich, in 1948. He ends up having 5 children with her. But she got to be a part of some of the amazing finishing up college and professional career stats that Chuck certainly made for himself. You mentioned that he was drafted in 1949. The Eagles were champions that year. His rookie season, they end up winning it all. And then 1960, they win it all again. They defeat the Green Bay Packers. 17-13 was the final there. But Chuck was surrounded by controversy. And let's talk about that hit back in 1960. What a year that both Chuck and everybody else had. And if Jeremiah would give us those photos right there. In a game in 1960 against the New York Giants there at the end of the season, Chuck ends up hitting Frank Gifford, the running back out of the University of Southern California for the Giants. And you'll see in the bottom middle in black and white, there's some head-to-head contact. And Frank was out before he hit the ground. And you can see the picture on the top there, Vincent, where he's kind of standing over. He was excited that he said, this is Chuck's words, that he created a fumble, and they ended up getting the ball. Everybody else was going, wait a second, man, what are you talking about? You knocked this guy out. He was cold and out like a light for 10 minutes at least. So there were some folks that were saying he was showboating, and he has since apologized for that on numerous occasions, but that's just part of the game. He had another controversial hit with one Chuck Noll. He and Chuck were playing against each other. Chuck was a member of the Cleveland Browns back in those days, and on a punt, Chuck ends up with his helmet. He hitting Chuck Noll, hits Bednarik in the face, and the two of them get into a fight, and this was a game on television. And the league steps in and says, hey, wait a second, we can't have this kind of stuff. We want to keep a family image and an atmosphere that's friendlier, and we know that these guys are going after it. And again, this guy's been in war. There are a lot of guys that came back from war that ended up making the NFL, and it was very hard to discipline those guys. they'd been overseas and they'd have live bullets, whether you're in Asia against the Japanese or in Europe against the Germans. And there were some rules that got broken out there. It's very hard for an official to tell a guy that is a veteran, so to speak, from a military standpoint, Vincent, and to tell him what to do and how to back off a little bit. But the hit was called, well, it was controversial. Let's just put it that. But a straight arm that went across Frank, and then the head-to-head and those suspension helmets. Back in those days, man, it was contact that would leave a mark on you. So obviously it knocks Frank out. But you mentioned that specific hit. There's so many others that Chuck had. And again, this is 1960. This is the year that the Eagles ended up being NFL champs.
The year I was born, 1960. How ironic. All I can say is that when you look at that hit, that's football. I would like to know if he would have had that hit in today's time, how would the league handle that? Just out of curiosity. When you look at the hit and you look at it like going fast, boy, it was a collision. Perfect tackle. And think about this. He put Frank Gifford out of football for 18 months.
Yeah.
But what I'm going to remember Chuck B about is the 1960 Eagles team that won the championship. One of the teammates he had on that team, Sonny Jurgensen. Marion Campbell, the Swamp Fox out of South Carolina, former head coach of the Atlanta Falcons. Tom Brookshire, former guy that used to be the guy I was growing up watching the National Football League game of the week on the national telecast. He was the color guy before John Madden. Then, of course, Tommy McDonald, Boomer Sooner, University of Oklahoma. And the Flying Dutchman, Norm Van Brocklin, who was the quarterback. Boy, that was man, you talking about a guest of characters on that 60s Eagles team. And then the player in the game that won the Eagles the championship. People don't remember Chuck B made that tackle on Jimmy Taylor of the Green Bay Packers and held him down as the clock ran out. And it was like 30 seconds, and you just held Taylor down and the clock kept running. There was a lot of controversy after that. But, man, when you're talking about football players that I grew up with, football players that when people mention their name, they mention dirtiness, they mention toughness, they mention when they hit you, you better watch out. And you get a chill in your body. Joe Green, Dickie Jones, Dick Butkus, Lawrence Taylor, the assassin Jack Tatum, and you put that November 20, 1960 hit up, Chuck B out of Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, that gets your skin crawling. And this week was so special about the 100 yards of football. We're going to have our draft show on Thursday night. So if you ain't ready to go and join us, then I don't know what's wrong with you, because this man today is a perfect guest who we talking about. Everything I just said about him as a football player and as a human being is special. John Wayne of football. Back to you, Hop.
Yeah, Chuck was certainly one of those tough guys. You mentioned the hit, the Jim Taylor incident. Jim Taylor, the only thing between the goal line and Jim Taylor at the 8-yard line was Chuck Bednarik. He tackles him, and then he won't get off of him. And you mentioned 30 seconds. I didn't know it was that long, but basically he wouldn't let him up. And the NFL had to reinstate a different rule in order to allow a player the ability to get up so they could run that last play. But Chuck said to Jim Taylor as the game was winding down, he goes, "Just stay where you are, Jim. This game's over. You're not getting up." Now, Chuck had some other controversies after his career was over, and it was a great one. 14 years, 2 championships with the Eagles back his rookie year, and then his final year, 1960. He had that fight with Chuck Noll that was involving the commissioner, Burt Bell, at the time. But then he got into broadcasting. He was with HBO. I think Lenny Dawson was one of the guys that was in the studio with him. HBO and Lenny were together with Inside the NFL for years. But Chuck would say some things. For example, there were a couple of times where he would openly criticize guys like Deion Sanders and Troy Brown, who played for the New England Patriots. Now, they were both two-way guys. When I played with Deion, obviously, he was a cornerback, but he would be on offense every now and then, run a go route, throw the ball to him. Who wouldn't want to do that? But Chuck had some opinions on that. He criticized Reggie White on occasions publicly. He criticized owner of the Philadelphia Eagles, Jeffrey Lurie. They had to have a come to Jesus meeting on more than one occasion. So Chuck was certainly a guy that would speak his mind, Vincent. And I think that he was, in most occasions, unapologetic. But if it did cost him, for example, the league wanted him and Jeffrey Lurie to patch things up and to be able to do so in a manner that everybody could say, all right, these two have mended fences and they've made up. But one of these tough guys, you go in the military, you learn how to do things, you do it right, you're taught how to do it, accomplish your mission. And there are occasions where Chuck disagreed with the way that certain people played or with the decision at the rules. But certainly the numbers of himself in the 14-year career that he had left him with a lot to talk about, some great days and some tough ones as well. But certainly Chuck was a mainstay, and he was, as I mentioned earlier, the last of the Mohicans, a guy that was a two-way player on the field for 45, 55, sometimes 58 minutes throughout the course of a game.
Admiration, respect. Even though he said maybe some controversial things after his career and criticized certain players, but I'm not going to take my respect for the Chuck B in his playing career and also in his post-career and what he did before he got to the National Football League. He's one of those human beings that you see walking the streets and you say, man, everything he touches is gold. Then he's one of them human beings that's walking the street and say, man, I don't want to try him. I don't want to throw hands with him. I want to be against him face to face across the line of scrimmage because he's fearless. He don't have no fear. As I ended with Chuck B today, he flew 30 combat missions. Every time he went up in the war in World War II, there was a chance he wasn't going to make it back. And this guy got to the National Football League. That was easy for him. That was like eating lunch. One of the greatest, toughest football players that's played this game from a two-way perspective, center and linebacker. My hat's off to you and my respect. Back to you, Mr. Harper LeBel.
Yeah, there are those that wrote about him after he was done at Penn. And as soon as he was finished back in 1949 as a rookie year, he goes, the greatest college center to ever play was Chuck Bednarik. And then people will say he was one of the greatest of the NFL at that same position. His wife, Mary, was featured in a 2004 documentary. Now, as Chuck got older, he started to fight against dementia. He died in an assisted living facility in Lehigh Valley in Coopersburg, Pennsylvania. He had 5 daughters, 10 grandchildren, and 1 great-grandchild before he passed away on March 21st in 2015. So some very interesting family things that took place, but was considered by many to be one of the greatest players in NFL history. 2 times he was an NFL champion. He was a first-team All-Pro 10 times in his 14-year career. He went to the Pro Bowl 8 times. He is a member of the All-50s team, the All-Decade team from the 1950s. He's on the 50th anniversary all-time team in the National Football League. He was in the 75th anniversary team. He was in the 100th anniversary team. He's in the Philadelphia Eagles Hall of Fame. He's a member of the 75th anniversary team of the Philadelphia Eagles. His number 60 has been retired. And when you watch the Eagles play now, you will see someone in the crowd that is wearing a number 60 Chuck Bednarik jersey, like he's wearing in the bottom right-hand corner of our screen. He was a Maxwell Award winner in college. He was a unanimous All-American in 1948 and 47, a second-team All-American in 1946. And what an amazing career. You mentioned, Vincent, that he played in 169 games. He started 166 of those. Think about that. And the 3 games that he missed in his career was during his rookie season. He had a little bit of an injury. 20 interceptions, 21 fumble recoveries. He did have 1 important touchdown that he returned as a member of the Eagles. But the U.S. Army Air Corps, he was a staff sergeant from 1942 to 1946. Hall of Famer as a professional and a collegiate. He is Chuck Bednarik. So thank you so very much for being a part of today's show. Vincent Turner, who is our co-host and founder. Obviously, we are grateful to him and everything that he does, and to Jeremiah Long, our producer and engineer. We greatly appreciate that. So thank you for tuning into our Legend Show. This has been 100 Yards of Football. We hope you have a fantastic rest of your day, everybody.